The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. Bible verses for power outages.
Hello and welcome to the Mark and Pete Show. We ask the question, why has the UK lost its power? Well, as many people will know, that the national grid had a major outage recently, and this left over 1 million people across England and Wales without any power. Well, according to the national grid, lessons will be learned. Well, the Director of Operations, Duncan Burt, told the media that as far as the systems were concerned, it worked well, and especially after the incredibly rare event of 2 power stations being disconnected. Well, many people believe that actually Britain's crumbling infrastructure is due to literally decades of underinvestment. As far as I'm concerned, actually, it's a little bit more of a broader picture and really reflects the fact that the UK is losing power. Fool Britannia, a country's poorest hour, neglect got rid of the national grid and Britain's lost its power. Cruel Britannia, the future's looking stark. We'll live in caves and be EU slaves, left forever in the dark. Well, Clergyman Pete,
Yes.
you're sitting there with a candle burning brightly, I know, in the hope that perhaps Britain's infrastructure will once again be back and come back to its former glory. But is it actually true to say that really Britannia has lost its power and maybe we are now really faced with the fact that we've neglected our infrastructure? What's your...
This idea that there's some sort of big issue with the fact that there was a power cut, I think rather that it's due to what one might call a concatenation of circumstances.
That's easy for you to say.
Yes. Well, the thing is, what I think it is several things went wrong and backups didn't work, and I think it's just one of those things. I'm sorry, but sometimes that just happens. You see, it's a complex business, the national grid. If you're trying to explain how a national grid works to your average layman, such as yourself, you might run into difficulties. Talking about potential difference and the importance of having a national grid set at one voltage, and all these different and then the step down and step up, and all the different things to do with it, which are to do with how you can manage to transmit electricity basically across large distances, and it does get rather complex, and you're trying to set it up all correctly, and then there's a lightning strike or a seagull flies into something, some power line. These, both of which has happened. We don't know the cause of this one. I don't think so. Maybe you're going to tell me otherwise. But my sources say that we don't actually know. But so that's what I think. Now, of course, that means that I don't think there was a moral failure or indeed a planning failure. But this doesn't change the effects of it. I mean, talking from a business point of view, I guess it's had it must have had an effect on business, affecting travel and affecting certainty.
Well, I think your point is valid, but I do believe that, in my opinion, this is actually as a result of decades of underinvestment. Now, many people have said, and just to close off this point, that they did think that it was possibly a cyber attack, effectively an unpredictable wind power generation may have been to blame, or something like that. Now, what the regulator, Ofgem, has demanded an urgent detailed report. Oh, we love reports. Yes, that's going to take forever and a day to get to. The bottom line is this, that what happened, as you quite rightly point out, Clergyman Pete, is that millions of people were left stranded because it happened on a Friday, and unfortunately at peak travel time. So many train passengers were left stranded with no access to toilets or food. Traffic lights failed, and there was gridlock on the roads, and homes lost their power. And I believe that you yourself were a victim. Now,
for a short time,
just for a short time, but nevertheless, it's still inconvenient. And it isn't it extraordinary that, of course, 2 power stations went down. They disconnected. Now, I would say that yes, it's probably unprecedented in this particular situation. But nevertheless, it should never have happened. This does have health effects. There are people who obviously were badly affected, for those who are left stranded in rather difficult circumstances. You're right about the impact on business, because business couldn't continue. But I do believe that this is where I believe that Boris Johnson has a bigger issue. Everybody thinks that he's got the issue of Brexit, but I actually think that his bigger challenge is how on earth can Britain become a bigger nation and actually start to invest in its domestic affairs. For decades, the money has been going into strange places. Yes, the EU, well, I think that's a big discussion in itself. But it's obvious that things like the National Grid haven't had the same investment as it should have had. Neither of the hospitals, neither is education, and many, many other things.
Well, yes, well, I mean, just going with that. So, talking about Britain losing its power. Well, of course, that's
economically, socially,
yes, in every way. And so, if we're just running with that idea, I would argue that this particular power outage, you can't say necessarily that it's due to, because we don't know the cause, due to the neglect, but that doesn't change the fact that they haven't really invested in it. So, whether it is in this case, there's an accident waiting to happen. But yes, lack of investment into infrastructure is a big thing. And here on Mark and Pete, we don't like big government doing lots of things, and so they're spending money on things they shouldn't be spending it on. But a good infrastructure, law and order, and defence of the realm are the three areas that
yes,
the government should be involved in, and I would say the only three. Now, they shouldn't, for example, be propping up the National Health Service. That should be run privately, and that would save a huge amount of money. And the education system is just just cannot be run at a high enough standard by government. It just can't be done, because what you need is teachers being trusted as they are in private schools. And that's you say that it can't be done. What I mean is it has been shown through evidence that it can't be done, not that theoretically it can't be done. So in all those areas, yes, Boris Johnson has an opportunity in leaving the EU to really rethink the way that the country's run.
Here's a clue to what happened. And Shadow Business and Energy Secretary Rebecca Long Bailey said that the impact of the power cut, yes, it was her fault, that the impact of the power cut was unacceptable at a time when National Grid, reported a 1.8 billion profits in recent times and increased dividends to shareholders. Now, this is a National Grid. Well, of course, obviously, when you've got shareholders involved, clearly profit counts. And this is where I come back to the point about infrastructure. I don't want to sort of harp back to bygone days when the nation owned all of its infrastructure, but I'm going to come back to the point that when you put infrastructure and commercial profit up front, naturally what will happen is something will go wrong. And we've seen this in many other ways. We've seen it with the railways themselves, again, the railway service has crumbled. It's always not on time. It's had major infrastructure issues. And we've seen it also with other areas of utility services where, unfortunately, water services, for example, haven't really invested, and they've been guilty of not holding standards. Just let me close out on this one point, which is, in my opinion, this is where I come back to the strategy. One of the reasons why Britain is not equipped to move forward as a powerhouse in economy, as well as its own infrastructure, is that, again, it's this fact that from a political viewpoint, there was a decision that was made over 30 years ago to deregulate industry and sell off the assets.
Yes.
And this selling off of the assets was predicted at the time that at some point that the nation would suffer. This is a classic example. We're a generation of suffering from fools of the past. This is where I believe that Boris Johnson has a chance to rethink what we can take back. I believe it's already been on the table. Labour Party themselves have said we should bring back the National Rail Service. I believe that we should also bring back things such as the National Grid and certainly some of the utility services. Now, we can't be doing this overnight because we just simply as a nation can't afford it. But I think as a policy, we should be starting to take ownership of our own infrastructure and invest for the long term.
Yes, well, investing for the long term is right. I would the only issue I would take is on the idea of ownership. You see, the problem with the rail service is not that it's not government owned, but rather that it's not national, and so you get competing. It could still be owned privately, but it should be run nationally, and the same is true for other things that we talked about the police service before, about the fact that it's not national makes it not work properly, and so when you talk about privatization, for example, let's take another example, the semi-privatization of hospitals. Doing a semi-privatization doesn't work. Gas suppliers, electricity suppliers, it doesn't work because the system of delivery is separate to the person you're paying. This is the same system of delivery for all of them, and so it's a half measure. Either you've got to have, for these important infrastructure systems, you need either completely private or completely government owned. But that's not the point. The point is, you see, if you were privately owned, it'd be regulated by the government. So the point is that it should be national, it should be coordinated, and they should be planning for the long term.
Yeah. Well, interesting you mentioned about hospitals.
Slight disagreement there, but
interestingly you mentioned about hospitals, because interestingly, most people will say, aha, but hospitals have generators. Well, this is true. Yes. However, try telling that to people in Ipswich, because in Ipswich Hospital, a backup generator was supposed to kick in when the power supply actually had an outage. Unfortunately, to supply outpatient areas, it didn't work, and that caused problems for over 15 minutes. Now, if you are a person who perhaps is being serviced by a medical profession and you're in a critical situation, really, disaster recovery is rather crucial. And if it's failing, so even if the backup situation fails, this comes back to, again, my point about a lack of infrastructure. It is a complex point. You are quite right. And I think that one of the things that's happened over the last 30 to 40 years is that the patching, if you like, the sticky plaster investments that have happened in bits of the hospital service, bits of the education service, bits of the infrastructure on transport hasn't worked, because quite simply we don't have a cohesive strategy. So the outage of the basically the national grid, I think, is just an illustration of an unfortunate situation. But I do believe it's a reflection of Britain's neglect of its own infrastructure.
Yes, let me just on the point of how you can run things well. We do have example of large organisations being able to run very well, and they've just improved leaps and bounds over the past 20 or 30 years, and that's supermarkets. The delivery of food by privately run supermarkets is so efficient that we can get food from around the world. It seems like miraculous what they can do now. Compare that to delivery of food by government as practiced, for example, in Russia, where there are huge queues even for bread and basic things. It just doesn't work. You just look at those two examples. Now, they're not different. That is not different to say who should supply the health treatment, who should supply the trains and the transport. It's just run better. If but you need it done nationally, and you need it to be coordinated. You see, supermarkets are very tightly regulated because they supply food, and yet they manage to deliver this food, which has very small profit margin, from around the world to down your street. We should go to private, completely private methods of delivering the most important parts of our infrastructure, because they're done more efficiently that way. But it has to be done in a coordinated way and in a tightly regulated way. And then we can do it.
Well, of course.
It's been shown.
And I do know that many industry experts have been screaming at the government at this, because the power cut happened at 1700 hours British summertime on the Friday. And the National Grid said, with blackouts across the Midlands, the southeast, the southwest, the northwest, and the northeast of England and Wales, clearly was an inconvenience. However, it claims that the National Grid said that it was not to blame. Now, industry experts have said that a gas-fired power station at Little Barford, Bedfordshire, failed 2 minutes before, effectively by the Hornsey offshore wind farm disconnecting from the grid. Now, who is to blame? I'm sure that there will be a deep investigation. Either way, as far as we're concerned as citizens, we want the system to work. We don't really care. So clearly something's happening here. Is it the National Grid? Is it someone else? Well, listeners, what do you think? Are you concerned at Britain's infrastructure? Perhaps maybe you think that Boris Johnson has got more on his plate right now. Yes. To simply get us out of the EU. Well, either way, why not let us know your thoughts? Log on, that's assuming you've still got power, to markandpete.com and let us know your thoughts. We'd love to hear from you on this subject. Well, thanks for joining us today, and join us next time for more colourful conversations with Clergyman Pete and Businessman Mark. Switch the light back on, Pete.